The pool had been open for exactly 4 days when Maggie found the graffiti. Someone had spray-painted KRN in bright red letters across the community center's brick wall, right where everyone could see it from the pool area. Below it, in smaller text, "Mind your own business." Maggie stood there at 6 a.m., still in her jogging clothes, staring at the vandalism. Her first instinct was to call the police, file a report, start an investigation. Her second instinct, the one that surprised her, was to wonder if they were right. "Pretty bold, whoever did it," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Sarah Martinez approaching with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. "You're up early," Maggie said. "Night shift rotation. Saw you standing here from my kitchen window." Sarah handed her the coffee. "Thought you might need this." The gesture was so unexpected that Maggie felt her throat tighten. "Thank you." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both staring at the graffiti. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said eventually. "Whoever did this proved your point about community standards." "How so?" "This is actual vandalism, real property damage, and it's ugly and disrespectful in a way that a kid's pool toys never were." Maggie sipped the coffee. It was perfect, cream and 1 sugar, somehow exactly how she liked it, and considered this. "I've been thinking about what Mrs. Chen said, about how people see me. And I don't want to be the mean pool lady." Maggie's voice was barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to do a good job. I wanted to matter." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I see when I look at you, Margaret?" Maggie braced herself. "Someone who cares. Maybe too much sometimes, but someone who genuinely cares about making this place better." Sarah paused. "The problem isn't that you care, it's that you've been caring alone." "I don't know how to not be alone," Maggie admitted. "I've been the responsible one my whole life. The one who follows rules and cleans up messes and makes sure everything runs smoothly. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that communities aren't machines, they're people." "So what are you going to do about the graffiti?" Maggie pulled out her phone, and for a moment Sarah tensed, probably expecting her to call the police. Instead, Maggie opened her notes app and began typing. "I'm going to send an email to the whole subdivision," she said, "asking for volunteers to help paint over it. Maybe we can turn it into a community art project instead." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "That's actually brilliant." "Don't sound so surprised," Maggie said, but she was smiling. "What about finding out who did it?" Maggie looked at the graffiti again. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else. Hurt, maybe, or frustration. Someone in their community felt unheard enough to resort to vandalism. "Maybe the better question is why they did it," she said. "Maybe we need to address that instead of just punishing the symptom." Sarah stared at her. "Who are you and what did you do with Margaret Thornfield?" "I'm still here," Maggie said. "I'm just trying to figure out how to be better." By noon, 17 neighbors had responded to her email. By evening, they'd not only covered the graffiti, but created a small mural featuring the Willowbrook Estates logo surrounded by handprints from kids in the neighborhood. Emma Martinez's handprint was right in the center, bright yellow like sunshine. As Maggie locked up the paint supplies, she found a folded piece of paper tucked under the community center door. Her name was written on the outside in careful block letters. She unfolded it to find a simple message. "I'm sorry. I was angry about my mom's citation for the garden gnomes. I know you're trying to help. Tyler, Elm Street." Maggie smiled and tucked the note into her pocket. Tomorrow, she'd walk over to Elm Street and have a conversation with Tyler and his mother about garden gnomes and community standards and finding middle ground. But tonight, she was content to sit by the pool and watch the last few kids of summer splash and play, their laughter echoing off the water like music. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Board meeting tomorrow at 7. Mrs. Chen wants to discuss the holiday decorations policy." Maggie typed back, "I'll bring coffee. And maybe we should put Tyler's mom on the agenda. I have a feeling she has some opinions about our policies." The response came quickly. "This should be interesting." As the pool lights flickered on and the evening grew quiet, Maggie realized she was looking forward to tomorrow's meeting. For the first time in years, She wouldn't be facing the community alone. But as she gathered her things to leave, she noticed a figure watching from the shadows near the tennis courts. When she looked directly at them, they melted back into the darkness between the buildings. The anonymous text from the week before flashed through her mind. Watch yourself. Maybe Tyler hadn't been her only problem. Maybe the real challenge was just beginning. Maggie straightened her shoulders and walked toward her car, keys ready. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new conflicts, new opportunities to do better. Tonight, she'd proven she could change. The question was whether everyone else was ready to change with her. The emergency AOA meeting was supposed to be held in the community center, but only 3 people showed up: Maggie, Sarah Martinez, and surprisingly, old Mrs. Chen from Maple Street, who'd never attended anything before. "This is about the pool, isn't it?" Mrs. Chen asked, settling into a folding chair with a grunt. "My grandson was supposed to have his birthday party there tomorrow." Maggie felt her chest tighten. She'd forgotten about the Chen boys' party. It had been on her calendar for weeks, carefully noted in her color-coded planner, but protocol was protocol. "The pool is closed indefinitely," she announced, reading from her prepared statement. "The damaged tile presents a safety hazard, and until we can get a professional assessment." "It's one tile," Sarah interrupted. "My husband can fix it this weekend." "Your husband isn't a licensed contractor. He's an engineer who built half the houses in this subdivision." Maggie's hands shook slightly as she shuffled her papers. Why couldn't they understand? She wasn't trying to be difficult. She was trying to protect them, all of them. The insurance company requires nothing," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "I called them this morning. They said minor cosmetic damage doesn't require pool closure unless there's an immediate safety threat." The words hit Maggie like a physical blow. "You called our insurance company?" "I called my insurance company. I used to be an adjuster, dear, before I retired." Maggie stared at the elderly woman, her carefully constructed argument crumbling. "But the liability is minimal for a chipped tile," Mrs. Chen continued. "Now, if you'd like to discuss the liability of closing a community amenity without proper board approval, that's a different conversation." The room fell silent. Maggie could hear her own heartbeat, loud and irregular. She'd been so focused on following the rules that she'd forgotten the most important one. She couldn't make unilateral decisions without board approval. But there was no board, just her. "I was protecting the community," she said weakly. "Were you?" Sarah's voice was gentler now, but still firm. "Or were you protecting yourself?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maggie thought about the last 3 years, about every rule she'd enforced, every violation she'd documented. When had she started seeing her neighbors as potential problems instead of people? "I don't know," she admitted, the words barely audible. Mrs. Chen leaned forward. "Margaret dear, do you know why I came tonight?" Maggie shook her head. "Because my grandson asked me to. He said the mean pool lady was going to ruin his birthday, and he wanted to know if I could help." Mrs. Chen's eyes were kind but steady. "He's 8 years old, and he knows who you are. Is that really how you want to be remembered?" The weight of those words settled over Maggie like a blanket. The mean pool lady. Is that what she'd become? "I could have the pool reopened by tomorrow," she said suddenly, "if we vote on it." "We?" Sarah asked. "The 3 of us. Emergency board meeting." Maggie's mind was racing now, remembering obscure bylaws she'd memorized years ago. "Mrs. Chen, you're technically eligible for the board. You've been a resident for over 2 years. "And me?" Sarah asked. "You too, if you want." For the first time in months, Maggie saw something other than frustration in Sarah's eyes. It might have been respect. "All in favor of reopening the pool pending cosmetic repairs?" Mrs. Chen asked. 3 hands went up. "Motion carries," Maggie said, and surprised herself by smiling. But as they gathered their things to leave, Maggie's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw what you did at the pool. Some of us don't appreciate troublemakers. Watch yourself." The smile faded from her face as she read the message twice, then 3 times. She looked around the empty community center, suddenly aware of how isolated she felt. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, noticing her expression. "Fine," Maggie lied, slipping the phone into her purse. "Just fine." But as she walked to her car alone, she couldn't shake the feeling that reopening the pool had been the easy part. The real challenge was just beginning. The chlorine tablets hit the pool water with a satisfying plop, sending ripples across the surface as 12-year-old Emma Martinez did a cannonball from the diving board. What she didn't see was Margaret Maggie Thornfield crouched behind the decorative fence, iPhone in hand, recording every splash. "Violation number 1, Maggie muttered, her perfectly manicured finger hovering over the record button. "Excessive splashing in violation of HOA Statute 12.4b. The Willowbrook Estates community pool had been her domain for 3 years running as HOA president, and she'd turned rule enforcement into an art form. Today's infrared thermometer reading showed the water temperature at 82.3 degrees, a full 0.3 degrees above the approved maximum. She had documentation. "Mrs. Thornfield." Maggie spun around, nearly dropping her phone. Sarah Martinez stood behind her, arms crossed, still in her nurse scrubs from the night shift. "I was just," Maggie began, "recording my daughter?" Again, Sarah's voice carried that dangerous quiet that made Maggie's stomach clench. "We've talked about this. The pool temperature is in violation," Maggie said, straightening her shoulders. "And there's the matter of the unauthorized pool toys." She gestured toward a small inflatable unicorn bobbing near the shallow end. Sarah laughed, actually laughed. "Margaret, that's a pool noodle shaped like a unicorn. It's literally designed for pools. The HOA guidelines clearly state." "The guidelines you wrote," Sarah interrupted. "The ones you keep changing every month. Remember when you banned red swimsuits because they were too festive?" Heat crept up Maggie's neck. The red swimsuit rule had been perfectly reasonable. It maintained aesthetic cohesion. But explaining that to Sarah Martinez, who seemed to think rules were suggestions, was like talking to a brick wall. "I don't make the rules, I enforce them," Maggie said, her voice rising slightly. "You literally make the rules, Margaret. You're the only one who shows up to the monthly meetings." That stung because it was true. Maggie had assumed HOA presidency when old Mr. Henderson moved to Florida, and she'd been running unopposed ever since. Not because she was beloved, but because nobody else wanted the job. The thankless job of maintaining property values and community standards. "Someone has to care about this place," Maggie said quietly. Something flickered across Sarah's face, not quite sympathy, but understanding. "Margaret, caring and controlling aren't the same thing." Before Maggie could respond, a loud crack echoed across the pool area. They both turned to see Emma's dive had knocked loose one of the decorative tiles from the pool's edge. The girl surfaced, looking mortified. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "That's it." Maggie's voice cut through the air like a blade. She pulled out her phone and began typing furiously. "Pool closure effective immediately pending repairs and safety inspection." "You can't be serious," Sarah said. But Maggie was already walking toward the pool equipment shed, her mind racing through the emergency protocols she'd memorized. Property damage meant liability issues. Liability issues meant insurance claims. Insurance claims meant paperwork, investigations, and most importantly, her authority to act decisively in a crisis. "Mrs. Thornfield, please," Emma called out, still in the water. "It was an accident." Maggie paused at the equipment shed door, key in hand. For a moment, she saw herself through their eyes, the uptight neighbor with too much time and too many rules. But then she thought about the lawsuit potential, the insurance premiums, the property values. Someone had to be responsible. She turned the key and killed the pool's circulation system. The sudden silence was deafening.